As I mentioned earlier, this is the latest in a series of events that is taking place. Our next scheduled talk is on the 4th of October. It's called the Gothic Rocket and focuses on the construction of the Scott Monument and ties in with our wider physical and digital exhibition on Walter Scott. Further information on both of those events will be available shortly in the events section of our website, and I will place a link to that section in the chat, in the conversation as well, so you can access that. But also very keen to get your feedback on today's event, and again there will be a link where you can complete a short form giving us your views on today's talk. Now, if I can go ahead, today's talk comes from my colleague Andrew Nicoll. Andrew Nicoll joined the Royal Commission on Ancient Historical Monuments of Scotland a number of years ago. HES went on to become Archives went on to become what is now Historic Environment Scotland, and Andrew is now Deputy Head of Archives. He's been in that position for almost 5 years. Before that, he was Keeper of the Scottish Catholic Archives, managing collections in Edinburgh, Salamanca and Rome, and he still serves as a trustee of the Scottish Catholic Historical Association and is involved in publishing a number of sources found in Roman archives. So Andrew, without further ado, can I pass over to you to share your screen with us?
Thank you very much, Neil. This is new to me. I've never done one of these talks in this way before, so please be gentle. I have to arrange screens in front of me and make sure I can see my paper and click buttons, so please do bear with me while I do that. Okay, and then you all disappear off the screen so I can't see you, which is an interesting experience, giving a talk to a group of people that I can't see. So you may be looking at me thinking halfway through, my goodness, when is this going to end? Or my goodness, what is he going on about? I apologize for that. I can't see the looks on your faces, so I will try my best to keep you interested throughout. Now, I hope you're seeing at the moment just a blank white screen. That's just the initial screen that I have there. And if I click here, we should hopefully see the title screen now. The title of this talk is The Travels of Marco Grimani, an epic account of the Papal Nuncio's legation to Scotland, 1543 to 1544. I suppose because I'm going to use the term Papal Nuncio often, I should just say simply that it's ambassador, the Pope's ambassador to Scotland. This talk is perhaps in two parts. The first part is giving historical background to what's happening in Scotland in the 16th century. And then the second part is giving a description of the account itself, which forms the basis for the talk today. I've pulled together a number of illustrations for the talk, which are as near contemporary as we have available. It's highly likely and really quite exciting that some of the engravings and the views that we will see here today, give or take the 100 years, were what Marco Grimani saw himself when he visited Scotland, except for a couple of things like St Andrew's Cathedral is unfortunately ruined in the engraving that I have an image of, but this will give you an idea of what Marco Grimani himself was seeing. Now, this talk, I have to confess, is really the product of work that somebody else did. Monsignor Charles Burns is a priest who lives in Rome. He was archivist in the Vatican Secret Archives for his whole working life. He's originally from Paisley, but he's now a canon of St. Peter's and lives in the Vatican. And this work, well, really, I was an aider and abetter for Monsignor Burns to make this work, to edit this work and get it made available as a publication, which I can show you near the end. So that's, without further ado, I guess, I will start working through the talk now. So, politics are often compared to a game of chess in which carefully studied moves are suddenly arrested by the removal of a single piece, even of a simple pawn, from the board, and fresh tactics are called into play. On the political stage too, cleverly made policies must be abandoned at the unforeseen exit of a leading actor. A classic example of this was the premature, albeit natural, demise of James V of Scotland in 1542 at only 30 years of age, which initiated a sequence of dire events that altered the course of Scottish history and had repercussions far beyond the confines of the realm. The young King of Scots had indulged in a disastrous, brief military campaign against his uncle, Henry VIII of England, which ended abruptly with the rout of his army and a complete loss of personal prestige. Shattered by the enormity of this humiliation and the prospect of its appalling consequences, he was reduced to a state of total mental and physical prostration. News that his queen had been safely delivered of a daughter, thereby securing a legitimate succession, brought him no consolation and indeed served only to aggravate his abject despondency. When the king died on the 14th of December 1542, the orphaned infant, the young suckling, began to reign as Mary Queen of Scots over a forlorn kingdom torn apart by internal strife. The nation was confronted with two constitutional problems of paramount importance. Who should take the royal child into ward and govern the country during her minority? And for whom should she be destined in marriage? The latter, though not at that moment as urgent as the first, remained the question of prime consideration in conducting the affairs of state in the years ahead. This was the moment for several key players to seek the centre of the stage. Mary of Guise, the Dowager Queen Mother, Cardinal David Beaton, the Primate of Scotland, James Hamilton, the second Earl of Arran and heir presumptive to the throne, and Matthew Stewart. Sorry, my PowerPoint slides. This is my first test drive now. And Matthew Stewart, 4th Earl of Lennox, with an almost equally strong claim as Arran's. On the 19th December, a joint Regency Council was proclaimed, but from the outset, its stability was dubious. Only 2 weeks later, the Earl of Arran emerged as sole governor of Scotland, overriding the party opposed to rule by one man. The immediate deciding factor in the struggle for power proved to be the repatriation of the Scottish nobles, taken prisoner after the defeat at Solway Moss. During their brief captivity in England, they had pledged to promote the English cause on their return home, and especially aim at bringing about the marriage of their queen to Henry VIII's son and heir apparent, Prince Edward. The monarch's ambitious policy had a certain rationality to it, for the matrimonial future of the infant Mary, Queen of Scots, seemed to lie only in the direction of England. Prince Edward, then aged 5, appeared the ideal suitor for her tiny hand, and their espousals would have united the two kingdoms forever under English rule. There was no other foreign prince whose prospects could be weighed more favourably against those of his English counterpart. Even the pragmatic French-born Mary of Guise seems to have resigned herself to the English match as the best option open to her daughter. The alternative to a match with a foreign prince could only be the marriage of the Scottish Queen to the son of one of her own nobles, which offered the appreciable advantage of keeping the crown within the control of its own people. If negotiations for such high stakes were to proceed with any degree of success, it was essential to curtail the power of Cardinal Beaton. Arran's usurpation of plenipotentiary powers was already a serious setback to Beaton, whose only hopes of gaining ascendancy and steering the ship of state away from English waters lay in keeping the governor under his own direct influence, no matter how much such control might be resented, even openly, as indeed went on record. Although James Hamilton had the best constitutional claim to be regent, his personal disposition rendered him obnoxious to many. The gravest suspicions were entertained concerning his orthodoxy, which caused many to fear how easily Arran might fall under the influence of Henry VIII and introduce policies of religious reform similar to those adopted in England. Contrary to those over-sanguine English expectations, the Scottish commissioners showed a determination to safeguard the sovereignty of the realm, even in the face of protests and threats from the English monarch, furious at their obstinacy and lack of compliance with his demands. When the treaties of Greenwich were signed eventually on 1st July, providing for the marriage of Edward and Mary, the Scots stood absolutely firm on several key points, namely that their queen should remain in Scotland until of marriageable age, that the Earl of Arran should continue to govern during her minority, together with lesser issues on which the king had expected concessions. Back in Scotland, meantime, public opinion had begun to veer away from the overtly pro-English policy of the governor and his associates. Even the cardinal's detention was proving an embarrassment to him. Towards the end of March, Arran had beaten, transferred to the castle of St Andrews, where His Eminence was master once more in his own stronghold, and eager to use every possible tactic to sabotage the negotiations regarding the Queen's destiny. The moment had arrived in this war of nerves for the governor and the cardinal to forget past grievances and adopt a new policy that would guarantee the safety of the Queen and her mother. So they were transferred from the Palace of Linlithgow to the greater security afforded by Stirling Castle. The Anglo-Scottish treaties remained a cause of dissension, and the Cardinal and his allies absented themselves from ratification on the 25th of August, but within a few days the Regent and the Primate became reconciled en route to Stirling, where on the 9th of September the 9-month-old sovereign was crowned Queen by Cardinal Beaton. This new alliance, formed by Arran, Beaton and Mary of Guise, was without doubt the best way to defend the interests of the Queen and the nation as a whole. In the months following the death of James V, Scottish affairs had been the object of attention not only in England but elsewhere abroad too. The King of France viewed Henry VIII's conniving with great misgivings, while the Pope was alarmed at the spread of Lutheranism under Arran's regency, as well as the violence to the person of the Cardinal Primate, reminiscent of the treatment of Cardinal John Fisher. Paris and Rome negotiated a joint policy that would safeguard the accepted balance of political power, in which Scotland was allied with France, and forestall any designs that might bring the nation into the Lutheran camp. To implement this in practice, the Pope appointed as his legate with plenipotentiary powers to the Scottish court the Patriarch of Aquileia, Marco Grimani, while Francis I entrusted this diplomatic mission to his ambassadors Jacques de la Brosse and Jacques Ménage. The designation Patriarch conjures up an image of a man of singular gravity and venerability. Without doubt, Paul III's choice of the Patriarch of Aquileia was singular, though for other reasons. Marco Grimani was born at Venice, probably around 1490, so only in his early 50s when he undertook the journey to Scotland. An uncle of his father's side was already Patriarch of Aquileia. Both Marco's elder brother Marino and younger brother Giovanni also distinguished themselves in the service of the church. Marco himself, however, preferred the lay state. In 1517, he married. Less than a decade later, in 1526, he was left a widower and never remarried. He rose in the civil service to be one of the most prestigious offices of the Venetian Republic, namely Procurator of St. Mark's splendid basilica. Shortly after this, there was a decisive change in his life. The Patriarchate of Aquileia was a monopoly of the Grimani family. Marino Grimani had succeeded his uncle in 1517 and in turn was now, in 1529, ready to resign the benefice in favour of his younger lay brother Marco, who in accepting renounced his civil for an ecclesiastical career. He remained a simple cleric without holy orders, and there is no record that he subsequently received priestly or episcopal ordination. A sign of particular favour was given when Paul III named the Patriarch his legate a latere for the delicate mission to Scotland. Marco Grimani's legation, from its inception at Bologna until his return to Rome, lasted approximately 15 months. Exactly 6 of these were spent in Scotland, where he arrived on the 4th of October 1543, until his departure on the 4th of April following. The diplomatic correspondence it generated is indicative of the importance that was placed on its succeeding and deserves closer study, even though the mission was not crowned without final success. Many accounts compiled near to those events gave notice of the Patriarch's visit, while modern historians also include at least passing references to him in their narrations of that period. However, by far the most original account of this legation is surely the Carmen, composed in Grimani's honour by a member of his entourage, in which his worthy conduct of affairs is recounted with careful attention to detail and chronological accuracy, coupled with a remarkable insight into the intrigue and betrayals which characterised this episode of Scottish history. It is doubtful if this epic account of the visit to Scotland ever reached the Patriarch, or, if so, it could only have been within the last days of his life, because Marco Grimani, having returned to Rome after the 24th of June 1544, died there prematurely on the 27th of July following. Hitherto, this versified account has gone almost unnoticed. There are manifest signs that the production of the Codex was a labour of love, its layout carefully planned down to the last detail, the folios accurately lined to accommodate the text, yet with ample margins to create a sense of elegance and artistic use of space. Written in Italian, in an elegant formal cursive hand, which very probably is the author's own autograph, since no other exemplar is known to exist in a draft copy or in a fairer version, it forms a charming little volume. And that is one of the title pieces there. The frontispiece displays the arms of Marco Grimani in colour. Unfortunately, the copy I have is black and white, but you can see a representation. The nature of the work is then explained in the title. I haven't been in Italy for over 2 years now, so my Italian is rusty. Historia quale tratta della morte del re Jacopo V di Scozia con il lamento della regina, sua consorte appresso il successo del viaggio, qual fece Monsignore Reverendissimo il Patriarca de Aquileia mandato per nunzio et legato apostolico nel Regno di Scozia 1543. I'm not going to do the numbers in Italian, I'm afraid. In a brief dedication, the author offers it to his patron, the Patriarch of Aquileia, mindful of his great kindness and grateful for the many favours received from his hands. The work consists of 6 cantos, composed of an unequal number of stanzas, 39, 27, 55, 53, 54, and 82. And each stanza is of 8 lines, the classical ottava rima used for epic histories. It has a strong resemblance to other Italian compositions of that epoch and belongs to the same literary genre as Orlando Furioso, even though the author is not in the same class as Ariosto. Bartolomeo Cataneo, the self-declared author of the Historia, continues to elude all attempts at identifying him better. He asserts that he was a priest, but poveretto preti senza un quattrin con roti I pani. He caught up with the Patriarch and his entourage at Tours as they made their way towards the French coast to join the fleet that would transport them to Scotland, and he seems to have stayed with the papal nuncio until they returned to Italy near midsummer the following year. Certainly the wealth of detail with which the Carmen abounds gives the impression that Bartolomeo Cataneo was an eyewitness to all of these events. The narrator gives the 24th of June 1544 as the date after which the Patriarch made his re-entry into Rome, and apparently his death from unspecified causes took place on the 27th of July following. A month later, on the 28th of August, the Apostolic Camera gave orders that the corpse be exempted from all toll fees during its transport to Venice for burial. In his last testament, the Patriarch left precise instructions that his body must not be interred beside an altar, nor even within the church, because a great sinner such as he did not deserve those honours. A vault costing not more than 200 ducats in the cloister of San Antonio Abate would do for him. No inscription marks his last resting place. No record indicates the exact whereabouts of that vault. The church itself has long been demolished to make room for public gardens. In the end, perhaps the only fitting monument to his memory that survives is this Carmen, in which Marco Grimani's noble character and virtuous conduct are eloquently extolled. That the author of the Historia attributed such importance to Marco Grimani's legation is itself exceptional, but that the destination of the papal nuncio was the Scotland of the infant Mary Queen of Scots surely makes this Carmen something of extraordinary interest. This is evident, as we shall see, even in an abbreviated paraphrase in English of those 6 cantos. That does not compare at all, however, with the original Italian version in ottava rima. I'm going to now give a brief an account of the entire work divided into the cantos with a description of what's in them. If I was to do this in any detail, we might be here tomorrow at this time. So I am going to only give the brief details of it, and then I can tell you how you can find out more afterwards. The first canto consists of 39 stanzas. The narrative opens with a precise description of political Europe in 1543 at the death of James V of Scotland. He had been succeeded by the newly born daughter Mary. Henry VIII of England proposed a marriage for her with his son and heir, Edward, thereby to unite the crowns. Not all were in agreement. Pope Paul III and Francis I of France decided to send a diplomatic mission to keep Scotland independent of England. Marco Grimani, Patriarch of Aquileia, was appointed papal nuncio. The second canto consists of 27 stanzas. It traces the Patriarch's journey from Bologna through northern Italy, across France, to meet the king at Saint-Germain-en-Laye. But several months were to pass before he could begin his voyage to Scotland. The third canto consists of 55 stanzas. The narration resumes with the departure of the Patriarch from Paris, travelling through Étampes, Orléans, Blois, Amboise, Tours, with a digression to Angers and onwards towards Nantes and Vannes, where Grimani was joined by Labrosse, one of the French ambassadors, then onwards until they reached the port of Brest, where he meets with the other ambassador, Ménage. Finally, they all set sail for Scotland, but immediately encounter adverse winds, leaving them no choice but to sail up the dangerous Irish Channel. Dense fog added to their difficulties, and at last they navigated the Firth of Clyde and dropped anchor near Dumbarton at about 2 in the morning. A salvo was fired to announce their arrival, and later in the day they disembarked. The fourth canto consists of 53 stanzas. News of the Patriarch's arrival soon spread. He was welcomed to Scotland by Mary of Guise and Cardinal Beaton, and invited to come over to Stirling quickly by way of Glasgow. Before doing so, however, a visit to nearby Loch Lomond was included in his itinerary. He made his entry into Glasgow with pomp and solemnity and spent some time with the Archbishop, but later left for Stirling in haste and in secret. He was received at court with great honour, and in the following days had several audiences with the Queen. Grimani's advice over the vexed matter of giving the French subsidy and artillery to the pro-English faction was ignored, and taking the other course of action proved to be disastrous. The fifth canto consists of 44 stanzas. There is a touching description of the sleeping infant Mary Queen of Scots being held in the Patriarch's arms, not unlike Holy Simeon of old. The Patriarch progressed by way of Dunfermline and Dysart to St Andrews for meetings with Cardinal Beaton, until it was time to return to Edinburgh, when the water in the ditches turned to ice and rain and snow a frequent occurrence. He entered the city by torchlight. And this is St Andrews, not as Marco Grimani saw it. The sixth canto consists of 82 stanzas, and so is by far the longest. The Council of State met to avert the threat of war in a colourful procession to the accompaniment of trumpets and drums that wakened the whole of Edinburgh, not unlike the festival. The Patriarch was permitted to address the assemble with a speech he had carefully prepared. His mission accomplished, he yearned to return to Rome, so he took leave of everyone and set sail for Harfleur. He called upon the French king. Then, starting from Paris, he travelled by the way of Montargis, Nevers and Moulins, rested for a few days at Lyon, crossed the Saône, the Rhône, and so over into Savoy as far as Geneva. Then to Lausanne, Bern and Zurich, and onwards to Brescia in Lombardy. His route took him to Mantua, Bologna and Florence, till finally he entered Rome by the way of Viterbo and Bracciano. He recounted to the Pope all that had transpired during his legatine mission to Scotland. And this is the Scotland that he would have seen and known, almost contemporary with his visit. Now, this is perhaps a very quick run through of this manuscript found in the Vatican Library in Rome. It is written in Italian, but it has been edited and made available as a publication via the Scottish Catholic Historical Association. The synopsis that I've given for each of the cantos is fully expanded, and you can learn more about the detail of what happened during his time in Scotland. And if you wanted a copy of it, you could email that email address there. We'll put that into the chat. And there is, forgive me, myself and Monsignor Burns in the Salone Sistina in the Vatican Library when we were undertaking this work. We had a number of weeks in Rome where we sat and proofed the volume, reading out the original manuscript and checking against the typescript that ensued. And that is, in fact, the book. And I think if I hold that there, I can show you that the book is there. I think it goes into, it shades out. And thank you very much. That is a very, well, it's part of 16th century Scotland, a part of the world that existed then. And I hope you enjoyed some of it, all of it. Thank you.